So, Dr. Cooper, in your practice, you treat people for what's called metabolic dysfunction or metabolic syndrome. I'd love for you to talk about just work in general and how that relates to health, because we spend so much of our lives at work. So, if you could take it there and just give us an overview of the impact that work can have on our health.
We do. We spend so much time at work, and it's really important to consider it as kind of a second home. And the environment at the workplace, whether it's a remote office or a commercial office space, could really be introducing certain things that might actually wear down our health. And so, especially the metabolism. And so it's good to be aware of some of those things. But having, we always talk about work-life balance, and that is really important, the work-life balance. And so hopefully people that are, getting to work feel ready for work when they get there because they're rested and they have that balance in their lives. It's particularly hard for some people, such as single parents, who are managing kids at home and then traveling to work and things come up. So I think work-life balance and then focusing on the environment at the office space, whether it's a home office or commercial office space, does a lot to really protect your metabolic health.
So let's talk a little bit more about just the idea that if things are going poorly at work, Dr. Cooper, what kind of impacts can that have on your health?
Well, if your sleep is disrupted, for example, say you're worried at night about the work that you didn't get to, you're falling behind, and so your mind is racing at night, you're checking your emails before you go to bed, obviously your sleep quality will be reduced as well as the sleep duration. And when that happens, your metabolic hormones don't balance correctly, and that can lead to increased stress hormones such as cortisol and increased hormones such as ghrelin, which makes you feel more hungry and slower. It actually affects our locomotion, which means if our ghrelin is high, we actually don't move around as much. We want to stay more sedentary. So the stress impact can be huge, and it can just accelerate all types of metabolic dysfunction, whether it's your inflammation markers or it's your ghrelin levels, your leptin levels, things that your blood sugar, your insulin, even your cholesterol actually can be affected.
So it seems like, Dr. Cooper, that there's not really like two versions of ourself, our work version and our home version. It's actually one version of who we are that has to navigate these two spaces, right? And what happens in one area of our life can have a big impact on other areas, right?
It's so true. It really is. And that's why it's great if you're in a work environment where that's kind of appreciated and celebrated. I think that workspaces and companies have come far since we were hit with COVID and the pandemic. I think it really made us reevaluate the way we mix our life responsibilities and our work responsibilities, and led to more flexibility in general in the workspace, which I think has actually helped to some extent, but it's introduced some new stressors as well.
I'd like to bring Elise into the conversation now. Elise, I know that, you are a super hard worker, and you had kind of a health scare not too many years ago because you just had, I guess, your head down, buried in work, and just worked so hard that your body kind of said time out. Are you comfortable kind of sharing with us what happened?
Sure I am. I've had a handful of health scares, but I think I know the one you're talking about. So you mentioned single parenting. So I am and have been a single parent my entire adult life. And I was very much a workaholic in a past career. I am also a person that identifies as being in long-term recovery from alcohol and substance use disorder. And so it's very normal for people that are dealing with that for their addictions to transfer over into things like work, shopping, you name it. And so for me, my identity and my persona got very wrapped up in the job that I had. And I was working very long hours, going to lots of events. I had a very long commute. On top of that, I'm I was also doing a lot of volunteer work. And oh, by the way, I'm parenting too. And so that left me at the age of 40 with having an emergency heart surgery. And unfortunately, it happened the week before Libby's wedding. And so I did not get to attend her wedding either. And so that was a real eye opener for me. That was definitely a point in which I realized that I had to take a look at very seriously figuring out how to have a work-life balance. And I was not able to figure it out at the job where I was experiencing that. So I left. And in the places I've been since, I have been able to, for the most part, I still do have a tendency to slip into workaholism. You know, I grew up, both my parents were really hard workers. My mom was a school teacher. My dad was an accountant, and they were at school. I mean, they were at school and at work all the time. And so that is what I grew up watching and modeling. Like, if you're a hard worker, that's a good thing. And I love to work, actually, especially the kinds of things that I work on. And so it can be a little bit of a slippery slope for me.
And we should mention Libby is part of the Work P2P team here, but is not on this episode. But I'd love to ask you, Elise, was your body giving you warning signs before that, or did you just have this attitude of just, I had a coworker one time who told me, I can sleep when I'm dead, and just had this just really hardcore attitude. Did your body give you any sort of warning?
You know, it's interesting that you say that, Mark, because it did. I didn't realize it at the time, but hindsight being 2020, when I look back at the things I was experiencing, my gums were bleeding excessively. And I thought that was weird. I just chalked it up to I'm not flossing well enough, right? I started getting winded at silly things like making the bed. But then other times I could work out and be totally fine. So I was getting winded at unexpected times. And then I very specifically remember there being a night when I Googled forgetting to breathe, because that is what I felt like I was experiencing. Like I would just all of a sudden start gasping for air as if I had forgotten to breathe, which we know is not possible. And so that was very scary. And then I actually started experiencing anginas leading up to my heart surgery. I think that word, I cannot say that word and keep a straight face. I'm so sorry.
Pain in the chest. We could just call it that.
Pain in the chest. And I didn't know, I thought I was having like panic attacks. I didn't know what it was. And they were progressively becoming more frequent and getting worse.
Dr. Cooper, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, all of those symptoms are really alarming. And you could see that if you're a workaholic, you sort of just have tunnel vision and drown out all those input signals that something's wrong and just stay focused on your work. And I can definitely see that's like a perfect storm about to happen.
There was one moment that I'm not proud of, but at this point, I had been to see a cardiologist. We had the stress test and the heart echo was scheduled, and he'd given me nitroglycerin and told me that if I was experiencing these symptoms that I should take one, and if they didn't go away immediately, that I should take a second one and call 911. So the way I processed that information is if I took it and it worked, then I could just go about my business. I didn't realize if I took it even once that I should have called him and told him, hey, I've taken this. And so between the time he gave me the prescription and the time I went in for my stress test, I took it 16 times. And one of those times I can very specifically remember I was at work, it happened, and I kind of lost a little bit of the use of my arms, and Libby had to come in and help me open up the pills and help me put it on my tongue. And then it worked. And I went right back to work. I mean, I went right back to work. I look back now and I don't even know who that person was. But it was, that seemed very normal for me at the time.
Dr. Cooper, what does nitroglycerin do when people have heart problems?
It quickly dilates the arteries to supply more blood flow to the heart muscle to give it more oxygen. So
I remember my grandfather used to take those and put them under his tongue, and he eventually died of a massive heart attack.
Yes, it's not a good sign.
We've come a long way since then.
Yeah.
But Dr. Cooper, when you see patients who are clearly sort of worn out from their jobs, well, how do you get people back on track?
It's tough. It really is. I mean, I think people bring a lot of it on themselves. And that's one thing I've noticed, especially you would think that switching to the remote work that so many people have been doing, you would think that would actually improve the work-life balance. But for a lot of our patients, it's been the opposite. And they just don't know when to stop working now. And they just sit at their desk and work all day, longer hours than they were working before, because they're no longer commuting and breaking up their day that way. So I think it's just reminding them, you have to set timers to take a break. You need to take breaks to hydrate, get nourished. You need to really set better boundaries at work as well, because I think unfortunately, sometimes employers don't realize this. And so then their expectations go up about what kind of work product you can put out. And so just being honest with yourself about that balance, I think, is important, whether you're working at home or in an office space.